The second lady I want to introduce is Dutch by origin but lives in Paris, France. Last year she had serious health problems, which at the end were proven to be caused by the substances in the chemtrails. She became very active in the chemtrail movement in Paris at CEPICA, and she's a very bright and intelligent person. You are. And she found out something very special about the so-called low-cost flying companies. Saskia Messanger.
Thank you for having me. So I'm Saskia, as you told, I'm Dutch living in France. And yes, just a short story. 2 years ago I got very, very sick. Already for 20 years I had health problems, and 2 years ago I couldn't walk anymore. And then finally I got the name of the illness, and they said, well, we can't do anything for you, it's incurable. And that was just a thing they shouldn't have said to me, because I wanted to get better like every single person in this world. And I started looking on the internet, and God bless the internet, and we have that. And very quickly I found ways to get better. And I got a doctor who was searching a little bit more than the surface, and she found chemical substances in my body, heavy metals, and some very strange bacteria. And then one night I made a Google. I lined up those 3 words, this bacteria, this hydroxide ammonium, and sulfur dioxide, and then I came on a website of Clifford Carnicom, which most of you maybe know, and he told me that it was falling out of the sky. And then it was like, you know, heaven came on my, fell down on earth for me, because I was so surprised. I never had heard on chemtrails. I didn't know what it was, and it's only 10 months ago, so I discovered it was September 1st, 2009. And since then, I'm very much investigating it. And I want to look more at the technical side, because, I mean, it's real. For me, it's real. I see it. They're doing it. So I wonder, how do they do it? So, yeah, who are spraying? Well, obviously, how do I, like this? Yeah. Obviously, aircrafts are involved. I mean, we all see the airplanes. Okay. Now, what kind of planes can that be? We have different kinds. We have that can be, I'm asking just questions, it can be military planes, we can have national planes from the national armies, we can have NATO planes, the UN forces, and obviously in the air we have a lot of commercial airplanes. So who are involved? Are they participating? I don't know, I'm asking questions. Well, I found on the internet there's some photographers which had really very powerful cameras, and they put this in the Common Creatives. It's a pool of photos you can share with other people, and this was put in the chemtrail pool. This is a NATO airplane. This is a US Air Force airplane. This is a low-cost company in Europe, EasyJet. Now, some about the low-cost companies. As we know on chemtrails, I think it started a little bit before Europe. We have heard stories it's starting earlier in the 90s in the United States than it was in Europe. Most comments or perceptions of chemtrails in Europe started end of the 90s, a little bit later. If we see the air regulation in the United States, it was... well, I looked in another low-cost company, low-fare airlines, which is Southwest Airlines. It was set up in 71. And then in 78, there was this Airline Deregulation Act. And from that point on, they could develop their sales very aggressively. And they opened up a lot of lines all through the United States. And then with that, we see also the chemtrailing going up. And then low-cost in Europe, I took some companies, but well, there are other ones. 78 Air Berlin, in 85 so we have Ryanair has been set up, EasyJet 95, and then in 97, and already for some years it was going on, there was some pressure to do some European airline deregulation, and on the 1st of April 97 it was completed, so any airline operator could have some flights all over Europe, and it was a free market, total free market on this matter. And what we see actually that in the end of the 90s, the chemtrailing is really starting and taking more and more over in Europe. Now, we can also see, if you see the sales of Ryanair, you know, a company which started in 85, had very low sales for a long time, and we see from the deregulation on, so 97, and then in 2001, and it's with all the low-fare airlines company, which I also wonder why, from 2001 on, after the 9/11 thing, they just exploded, which I think is a funny thing, because we would say, God, it's very dangerous to fly on low-fare airlines because it can be hijacked, you can get into a building or whatever. And funny enough, that really exploded. They had a very aggressive strategy. Obviously, the internet in booking and reservation policies that helped a lot to expand, but still we can, and I think like many, I always wondered, how do they do that? I mean, for 40 euros go all through Europe? I mean, how do they do that? So, well, let's get a little bit back to the technical thing. Okay, we see those airplanes, we see they leave trails. Well, because they're persistent, there must be something in it, some particles of any type. So how can they do it? Can they put it in the fuel? Well, I don't know. If you try to put in your reservoir in your car some particles and see how long your engine would work, mostly it very easily stops. So I think it's not a good thing to do, even for airplanes. Don't put particles in your fuel. Then I had read some testimonies on the internet about the wings, that it was spread through a system through the wings. I don't know, I'm not sure. Well, it can be. And then the engines, can it come through the engines by any means? But by what means? Well, anyway, if we look, and this is a commercial plane, we see that it directly comes from the engines, directly. So there must be some sort of device or something which made it possible that we think it's coming from the fuel, which I think it's not. So I looked a little bit more at the engines and how they're made, and mostly the engines are it's a huge market, and mostly it's held by CFM, which is a company which is a mixture between an American brand, General Electric, and a European brand, Snecma. And they're building those motors, and they're equipping almost a lot of military aircraft, but as well commercial planes, especially on the Boeing 737. And all low-fare lines, they mostly only have, let's say, 90% or even 100% Boeing 737 with this type of SBM 56 type of engine. And as you can see, it's very small, but there is a little device up at the left part, the inner cowl. There's a very little device. I will have some better pictures. Like this. And it's just in front of the, if you have the cowl, which is just the outer skirt of the engine. You have the engine inside, between there's air, because air have to circulate to cool down the motor and get through. And just in front of the turbofan, we have this device. It's a vent. I don't know where it's for. Some say it's de-icing. Others say it's to measure the pressure. I have, even on a technical basis, I didn't have the real explanation, but it can be de-icing. It can be for pressure, to measure the pressure. I don't know. But if it's for de-icing and to put hot air in front of it, why just on one side? I mean, it's easier, because I have seen some possibilities to put some things in the cones. It's easier to spread hot air through the cone, and then it's equally reparted on the whole fan, and will de-ice equally on all sides. So, well, I don't know. I just wondered about that one. As you see here on the drawing, there is this little tiny thing up there. Above, you see a little tiny thing of a few centimeters, which comes down, which is this little vent, and just in front of the turbofan. So, well, I mean, if we think it's a possible way, if you want to you can blow through that some particles, and it's sucked right away by the fan. It goes through along the motor. Well, it doesn't hurt the parts of the motor because it doesn't go into the engine, but it flows around. And then the backside, it seems as if it's coming out of the engine. So it's possible. It won't hurt the engine that way. So I'm asking questions. So if there's any engineering people in this public, or maybe people get to know it through the internet, is this possibility? Please help me find out if where it's for, this vans, and if it can be a possibility for chemtrailing. Then I looked a little bit closer to the financial side of those operations. I mean, all those companies, and I think mostly we wonder how you can fly for 40 euros, or even sometimes there are offers for 3 euros to come from Paris to Rome. I mean, how can they possibly do it? Because you can cut all cost. You can cut all costs, but what you can't cut on the fuel cost. I mean, if you have a certain number of passengers, you have to transport them. You have to need a certain amount of flights and planes flying, and that is non-compressible. You can't compromise that. You need to pay those fuel costs, and even if they're all doing hedging now and taking future options and trying to have good prices for the fuel, well, some companies are for sure a little bit more lucky than other ones, but still there's a huge difference. And basically they have the same load factors as, if I take a company, European company, KLM, Air France, which is a regular company, they have about the same load factors as they have Ryanair, EasyJet, or other low-fare airlines. They have basically the same number of passengers per flight. So I made a little comparison, which, okay, this is not science, but it's just an indication there might be something to look after. So basically you see the total revenues from, and I'm sorry for them to have picked them out, but they're public figures. Ryanair, so it's 2.9 billion. You have to read it like that. I put it in millions of euros. I all converted it to euros. 2.9 billion for Ryanair, Air France, KLM, 23 billion. 0.9 billion, Southwest 7.3 billion. And then the total passengers, and as you see, Air France, KLM, and Ryanair, they're very close in passengers. Ryanair, a local airline, as that is transporting as much passengers as Air, and I think even this year, because they're 2008 to 2009 figures, because Ryanair haven't yet published his 2010 figures. But they will come equally with Air France, and then the fuel costs, and look at that. Obviously, if you see the ratio between fuel costs and total revenues, I mean, you see, okay, that's all right. I mean, 3 billion for Ryanair with 1 billion of, it's a 1/3 about, or 1/4 of revenue, so that's a normal ratio. But then if you look at the passengers, what I say, you have to transport those passengers. I mean, and then, so I made some calculation, which is not science, and it's maybe on business principle, it's maybe not a good ratio to try to find, but I got a fuel cost per passenger. So what every company is paying for the fuel cost divided by the number of passengers they're transporting each year. And then I found Ryanair, 21 euros. So every passenger, what they transport on every flight, it costs them 21 euros. Think about them selling tickets at 3 euros or 10 euros or 20 or 40 euros, which is amazing. Then Air France, KLM, it would cost them, if per passenger, about 72 euros to transport a person. And Southwest, which is also low airfare line in the United States, is also very low. And I looked also at British Airways, which is also another regular company in Europe, and you get also a figure. Well, I didn't get the cargo out. For Air France, I corrected with the cargo. So I think basically it was the same thing as Air France, KLM. But you see a huge difference. And so I'm asking myself the question, how can they have so low fuel costs? And well, I think that needs to be investigated. It's something to get on with. This is Michael O'Leary. Or can you shut off the light here up there? Because it's very hard to see. But there you almost can't see it, but he's pointing out the little device. Well, this is another thing. I didn't. But there, in all those Boeing 737, SVM 56 engines, there is this little device. So anyone can help me to figure out what it's doing, and if there's any relation to the chemtrailing, please let me know. And then the last thing, there's another thought, because lots of you might know that this has a name. They call it Operation Cloverleaf, which should be the military name. I don't know if it's true or not. But I was thinking a lot about well, I came to this whole story because in the... still some time? No? Okay. There were, well, okay, the cloverleaf, and I found, why cloverleaf? I mean, it looks like a cloverleaf, or do they put it in the sky? No. And then I came across this bacteria, because we all know they put bacteria and viruses probably in it. And I found that one, it is, and they're doing a lot of research on this one, Deinococcus radiodurans, which is hard to kill. It can resist to any radiation, it can resist to any temperature, to any physical condition, and it has an unusual capacity of DNA repair. And I know the Greg Venter Institute in the United States is doing a lot of research of that, and they're making out of it Mycoplasma laboratorium. And I know that Mycoplasma is coming down from the chemtrails. And well, this bacteria always clusters in 4 and looks like a cloverleaf. Thank you very much.